What if the family meant to love and protect you was the source of your deepest pain? Victoria spent her life as an outcast in her own home, unwanted, unloved, and treated like a maid. But when the man who proposed to her was given her younger sister instead, she uncovered a truth so shocking it would change everything. This is a story of pain, jealousy, deception, and an unexpected twist that changes everything. Tony and Priscilla Okocha had everything: money, status, and a happy home with their 2 sons. They eagerly awaited the birth of their 3rd child, a daughter who would complete their family. On a beautiful evening, Priscilla gave birth to Victoria, a healthy baby girl. The couple's friends and family celebrated her birth, and a grand child dedication ceremony was planned. Dignitaries, business moguls, and church leaders gathered to bless Victoria. The priest, placing his hand on her, declared, "This child is special. She will bring light to many." The Okochas believed she was destined for greatness. But fate had other plans. That evening, on their way home, tragedy struck. A truck lost control and rammed into their car. The impact was devastating. Tony, Priscilla, and their 2 sons died on the spot. Among the wreckage, miraculously unharmed, was Victoria, alive in her mother's arms. Tony's younger brother, Damien, a single man in his 30s, neither wealthy nor ambitious, but the only family left, was left with the responsibility of caring for Victoria. The family's vast fortune was entrusted to him, to be held in trust for Victoria until she came of age. He cared for her like his own daughter. Damien had never lived in wealth like his brother. Now, he controlled an empire, properties, businesses, and a massive fortune. Why should a child have so much when I have nothing? The thought poisoned his mind. At first, he dipped into the funds carefully, just a little here, a little there. But greed is never satisfied. Soon, he was spending recklessly, convinced that by the time Victoria grew, no one would remember what belonged to her. A year later, Damien met and got married to Jennifer, a charming and beautiful woman who seemed perfect. When he told her about Victoria and the fortune her parents left for her, she saw an opportunity. "Why wait until she grows up?" Jennifer whispered. "She doesn't need that money, you do." Jennifer encouraged Damien's greed, convincing him that Victoria was a burden, an obstacle to a better life. "If you're not careful, people will ask questions," she warned. "The easiest way is to make her invisible. Treat her like she's nothing. That way, no one will remember she even exists." Damien changed overnight. Love was replaced with coldness. Care turned into neglect. At just 3 years old, Victoria was no longer treated like a daughter. She was treated like a helpless child living under his roof. Jennifer made sure of it. "You eat after us. You sleep on the floor. You don't speak unless spoken to." The house staff, seeing how she was treated, followed suit. Victoria became invisible. As she grew, she was forced to clean, cook, and serve the family. Victoria didn't understand why she was different. "Why do Daddy and Mummy hate me?" she often wondered. Still unaware that they were not her real parents. By the time Victoria turned 6, Jennifer had completely taken control. She now had 2 children of her own, a set of twins, a boy and a girl. Victoria was forced into endless chores. Cooking before dawn. Cleaning every corner of the house. Washing Jennifer's fine clothes. Taking care of the twins, who were treated like royalty. The injustice was clear. Victoria was the oldest, but she was treated like a maid while the twins were pampered like heirs. Victoria hoped her father would defend her, but Damien had changed. He no longer saw her as his responsibility. The more Jennifer pushed, the more he avoided Victoria. "As long as she's alive, I don't care what happens to her," he muttered once when Jennifer complained about Victoria. In the eyes of the public, Damien and Jennifer still acted like loving parents to Victoria. "Oh, we love Victoria like our own," Jennifer would say in public. "She's undoubtedly my first and beloved daughter." But behind closed doors, Victoria ate from separate plates, wore old, worn-out clothes, and slept on a thin mat on the floor. Despite Jennifer's cruelty, Victoria was sent to school. Not because they cared, but because they feared social services might start asking questions. But while the twins attended the best private schools, Victoria was placed in a struggling public school. Still, Victoria excelled. She was brilliant, hardworking, and determined. She soaked up knowledge like a sponge, knowing that education was her only escape. "You think you're too important, don't you?" Jennifer sneered whenever Victoria got praise at school. But Victoria was not broken. She excelled academically, topping her class despite everything. And the more she succeeded, the more Jennifer and her children resented her. The twins, Nathan and Nadia, were growing into spoiled, entitled brats. They saw how their mother treated Victoria and followed her lead. Nathan would spill food on purpose, just to watch Victoria clean it up. Nadia would tear her school notes, laughing when Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "She's just a maid," they would say. "Why should she go to school anyway?" And when Victoria protested, Jennifer would beat her and say, "Do you want me to stop sending you to school?" So Victoria learned to swallow her anger. But inside, her resentment burned. Years later, Victoria, now a grown fine woman, had barely adjusted to the constant resentment from her family. She was working now and earning her own money. Her parents and siblings had relaxed their maltreatment of her. One day, an unexpected opportunity arose. A well-dressed man arrived at her family house, asking for her hand in marriage. His name was Charles, a childhood family friend who had always admired her. He was doing well for himself, and now, he was ready to settle down. "I want to marry Victoria," Charles said confidently. "She is smart, hardworking, and I believe she will make a good wife." Victoria was stunned. After all the suffering, was this finally her chance at happiness? But before she could speak, Jennifer let out a mocking laugh. "Victoria? Marry you?" she sneered. "You must be joking." Jennifer and Damien pulled Charles aside. "Victoria is ungrateful," Jennifer whispered. "She's a stubborn girl who disrespects us after all we've done for her." "She has nothing to offer you," Damien added. "But our other daughter, Nadia, she is perfect for you." Charles hesitated. "But I came for Victoria." Jennifer smiled, her voice sickly sweet. "Trust us, Nadia is better. A real daughter of this family. She was raised well, not like Victoria." It was a well-crafted lie, designed to make Victoria look like a worthless mistake. And Charles believed it. Charles got married to Nadia. The wedding was eventful and very colorful. Victoria was heartbroken. She couldn't believe it. Her only opportunity to escape from this wicked family was lost. One day, Nadia came visiting. She was glowing. She spoke about her husband with pride. "He is the best man for me," she said joyfully. On seeing Victoria walk in, she started showing off the beautiful gifts her husband got for her. She mocked Victoria. "Oh, poor, stupid Victoria," she sighed. "You really thought a man would marry you? A charity case? A maid?" Victoria's blood ran cold. "Our parents planned this," Nadia continued, her voice dripping with mockery. "They made sure Charles would pick me instead. And do you know why?" She leaned in, whispering words that shattered Victoria's soul. "Because you are not my sister. You are not even part of this family." Victoria's legs felt weak. What do you mean?" she gasped. Nadia laughed. "You were adopted, Victoria. You are nothing but a pity case. Our parents took you in because they had no choice. But you were never really one of us." Victoria felt like she couldn't breathe. She turned to Damien. desperate for him to deny it. But his silence confirmed everything. The room felt smaller, suffocating. Everything she had ever known was a lie. She had suffered for a family that never even claimed her. She had endured Jennifer's cruelty, hoping for acceptance that would never come. She had believed she belonged, when in reality, she was just an outsider. Nadia's voice was a final stab to her heart. You were never meant to have a good life, Victoria. You were meant to serve us. You are nothing. Victoria ran. Ran from the house. Ran from the people who had stolen her life. Victoria stormed back to the house, her heart pounding with rage and betrayal. She burst into the living room, her voice trembling with emotions she could no longer hold back. Tell me the truth, she screamed. Damien and Jennifer froze. I am not your daughter, am I? Victoria's eyes burned with pain. You stole my life. You made me suffer, and I still stayed loyal because I thought you were my family. But I was nothing to you. Jennifer crossed her arms, smirking. So. You finally figured it out, she said coldly. Good. Saves us the trouble of pretending. Victoria turned to Damien, desperate for an explanation. Daddy, how could you? Damien let out a long sigh, avoiding her gaze. You were never supposed to know. Know what? Victoria's voice cracked. Who am I? Damien hesitated. Then, with a heavy sigh, he told her everything. Your real parents were my elder brother, Tony, and his wife, Priscilla, he admitted. Victoria felt her knees weaken. On the day of your child dedication, your parents and siblings died in a car accident. You were the only survivor. Victoria's breath hitched. They died. Yes, Damien continued. And since you were just a baby, I was given custody over you. Your father left behind wealth, money, property, everything. But. He hesitated. Victoria stared at him. But what? His shoulders slumped. I used it all. I spent it. Every last penny. Silence fell over the room. Victoria felt like the ground had vanished beneath her feet. You squandered my inheritance, she whispered. I was young, Damien muttered. I thought I would replace it before you got older. But time passed, and before I knew it, it was all gone. Jennifer let out a mocking laugh. You should be thanking us, she sneered. We fed you, clothed you, gave you a roof over your head. What more did you expect? Victoria saw red. You stole everything from me. My parents' wealth, my life, my dignity, she shouted. Jennifer's face twisted in irritation. And? What can you do about it? Cry. Damien remained silent, his guilt evident but his greed stronger than his remorse. Oh, this is delicious, Nadia chuckled. Victoria, the orphan beggar, finally learns the truth. And what now? You think anyone will care? Victoria's fists clenched. You are evil, Nadia, she said through gritted teeth. No, dear sister. I am powerful. And you? You are nothing. The words cut deeper than any knife. She had suffered under people who only saw her as an obstacle. Without another word, Victoria turned and walked away. Jennifer laughed behind her. Good. Don't come back. But Damien said nothing. Miles away from Victoria's suffering, in a small, unfinished apartment, a man sat deep in thought. His name was Fred, a young bricklayer. He was an only son, raised by a widowed mother who had given him everything she could. Now, as he approached his 30s, his mother had one request. Son, it's time you got married. Fred sighed. Marriage? In this life of hardship? His hands were rough from labor, his clothes forever stained with dust and cement. He had seen how women chased wealth, and he knew that his kind of life was not appealing. Find a woman who will love you for you, his mother advised. Not for what you have or don't have. Fred pondered this. There was one woman who had always caught his attention. A woman who was beautiful but carried deep sadness in her eyes. Victoria. The next day, Fred appeared at Damien's house. Jennifer narrowed her eyes when she saw him. "What do you want?" she asked. Fred stood firm. "I have come to ask for Victoria's hand in marriage." A stunned silence filled the room. Then Jennifer burst into laughter. "You? A mere bricklayer? Want to marry Victoria?" she mocked. Damien smirked. "Why her?" he asked. "Because I see her strength," Fred replied. "She deserves love and happiness." Jennifer snorted. "Happiness? She is nothing but a burden. But if you want her, take her." Then, an idea struck her. She leaned close to Damien and whispered, "This is the perfect punishment for her. She lost her rich suitor, and now, she will marry a poor laborer. Let's humiliate her completely." Damien smirked. "Victoria," he called. Victoria walked in, her eyes wary. She was not prepared for what she saw. Fred sat there, looking calm and confident. "What is going on?" she asked. Jennifer smiled sweetly. "A man has come to marry you, dear Victoria," she said in a mocking tone. Victoria's stomach twisted. "Who?" Fred stepped forward. "I am Fred Obi. I want to marry you." Victoria stared at him. A bricklayer? After everything she had suffered, was this what life had reduced her to? "No," she said immediately. "I will not marry him." Jennifer's smile widened. "Then you will leave this house with nothing." Victoria's breath hitched. "What do you mean?" Damien finally spoke. "If you marry him, I will give you the properties and money your father left for you," he said. "But if you refuse, you will get nothing and will never step into this house again." Victoria's hands shook. She turned to Fred, who looked at her calmly, without pity. "I won't force you," he said. "But I promise, if you choose to marry me, I will never treat you badly." Victoria's heart raced. Was this another trap? Or was fate giving her one last chance? The room was silent, waiting for her answer. Her mind screamed, "Say no." But her reality was harsh. She had no home. She had no money. She had nowhere to go. And if she left this house now, she would be on the streets. She closed her eyes, tears threatening to fall. Then, with a voice that felt like a death sentence, she whispered, "I will marry him." Jennifer grinned. Damien nodded. And just like that, Victoria's fate was sealed. Victoria sat in her new home, a small, one-room apartment with a leaking roof and cracked walls. She was now Fred's wife. But there was no celebration, no love, no joy. Her wedding had been a simple one, rushed and humiliating. And now, here she was, in a house that smelled of cement and sweat, with a husband she did not love. Days passed. Victoria found herself sweeping, cooking, and fetching water in a way she had never done before. Fred worked tirelessly at construction sites, returning home covered in dust and exhaustion. He was kind, always making sure she had food to eat, but he never forced conversation. He knew she resented him. And she did. Each time she saw him, she remembered what she had lost. "I should have fought harder," she told herself at night. "I should have run away." But run to where? She had no one. One evening, after weeks of silence, Victoria could no longer hold back. "You tricked me," she suddenly snapped. Fred, who had just returned from work, looked at her calmly. "How did I trick you?" Victoria's eyes burned. "You knew I had no choice. You knew they hated me. You took advantage of my desperation." Fred sighed. I did not force you, Victoria. I simply gave you an option. And you chose. His words stung because they were true. But before Victoria could reply, there was a knock at the door. When Victoria opened it, she froze. Standing there, with a wicked smile, was her younger sister, Nadia. The same sister who had mocked her after stealing her suitor. I just came to see how the rich madam is enjoying her new life, Nadia said, smirking. Victoria's hands shook with rage. Why are you here? She demanded. Nadia laughed. Oh, just to bring you some news. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. You see, dear sister, my father never planned to give you a single dime. Victoria's blood ran cold. What? Your inheritance is gone, Victoria. All of it. The money, the properties, everything. My father squandered it all years ago. That whole marry a poor man to get your wealth nonsense. It was all a lie to humiliate you. Nadia's laughter echoed in Victoria's ears like a nightmare. Her hands gripped the door for support. You're lying, she whispered. Nadia grinned. Go and ask him yourself. Then she turned and walked away, leaving Victoria shaking. That night, Victoria could not sleep. The next morning, she marched to Damien's house. She banged on the gate until he opened it. His face twisted in annoyance. What do you want? Tell me the truth. Victoria screamed. Where is my father's money? Damien's expression shifted. He knew. She knew. There was nothing left to hide. It's gone, he said flatly. All of it. Victoria's breath hitched. You stole from me. Damien's face hardened. I raised you. I fed you. That money was better in my hands than yours. Victoria's heart shattered. It had all been for nothing. The marriage. The suffering. She had lost everything. She walked home like a ghost. Her whole life had been built on a lie. She had endured pain and humiliation for an inheritance that never existed. When she entered the house, Fred saw her pale face and knew something was wrong. Victoria, what happened? She looked at him, her eyes empty. I have nothing, she whispered. Nothing at all. Then, for the first time since she got married, she collapsed into his arms and cried. Days turned into weeks. Victoria woke up before dawn, swept the compound, cooked with firewood, and struggled to fetch water from a distant well. She had once lived in a mansion with maids, now she barely had enough to eat. Fred, despite his humble appearance, worked tirelessly. He never complained, never treated her badly. But Victoria felt trapped. She had nothing left, no family, no wealth, no future. Her sister still mocked her at every opportunity. How does it feel to be a pauper's wife? Sophia sneered one day. Victoria had no words. She had accepted her fate. Or so she thought. One afternoon, Victoria, now pregnant, was washing clothes. Fred walked in with a sealed envelope. Someone brought this for you, he said casually. Victoria frowned and took it. Inside was an invitation. A baby shower. Her baby shower. She blinked in confusion. What is this? She asked. Fred smiled softly. Come with me. He led her outside to a waiting black SUV. Victoria froze. She had never seen this car before. Whose car is this? She asked, suspicious. Fred ignored the question and opened the door. Just get in. Against her better judgment, Victoria obeyed. The car drove through familiar streets, but then, it turned toward the wealthy part of town. Her confusion deepened. Finally, they arrived at a massive estate. Victoria stared, speechless. Dozens of people stood in the compound, waiting. The gates swung open, revealing a grand mansion. And at the center of the crowd was a massive banner. "Congratulations, Victoria." Tears filled her eyes. What is this?" she whispered. Fred turned to her, his expression unreadable. "Your new home." Victoria stumbled back. "Stop joking, Fred," she snapped. "This is someone's house." Fred sighed. "It's mine." Victoria froze. "What do you mean yours?" Fred took her hands gently. "I've been keeping a secret from you." Her heartbeat quickened. "I am not a poor bricklayer, Victoria. I own a construction company. I build houses and estates." Her breath caught in her throat. "Lies," she gasped. "You live in a one-room apartment. You mix cement with your bare hands." Fred smiled sadly. "Because I needed to be sure." "Sure of what?" "Sure of you." Fred led her to the mansion, his voice gentle but firm. "I grew up seeing men marry for the wrong reasons: money, power, status. I didn't want that. I wanted someone who would love me for me, not my wealth." Tears burned Victoria's eyes. "So you tested me?" Fred nodded. "And you passed." Victoria felt weak. All these months. The suffering, the pain. She had thought she was doomed to poverty and shame. But all along, she had married a wealthy man. Her legs buckled. Fred caught her before she could fall. "I'm sorry, Victoria. But now, your suffering is over." As they stepped inside, Victoria was met with a lavish party. She was showered with gifts, love, and warmth. Then, Fred presented her with a car key. A brand new luxury car. Victoria's tears fell freely. For the first time in years, she felt seen, loved, valued. Her pain had not been in vain. She turned to Fred, her voice shaking. You changed my life." He held her close. "No, Victoria. You changed mine." The sun shone brightly as Victoria stepped out of the luxurious SUV, her heels clicking against the pavement. The same house that once threw her out in shame now stood before her. Only this time, she had returned, not as a beggar, but as a woman transformed. Her husband, Fred, stood beside her, calm and composed. Behind them, 2 more SUVs followed, carrying bags of food and gifts. It was not revenge that brought Victoria back. It was closure. Jennifer looked up and saw Victoria. Her eyes widened in disbelief. "Victoria," she gasped, gripping the door for support. The uncle slowly turned, his expression frozen in shock. "Impossible," he whispered. Victoria smiled slightly, not in arrogance, but in understanding. "Good afternoon, uncle." "Aunt Jennifer." Silence fell over the compound. "My daughter. My daughter." Jennifer cried. "You're alive. You're well." Victoria didn't move. She only stared. Years of suffering and betrayal flashed through her mind. The nights of hunger, pain, rejection. Now, they wanted to act like nothing had happened. Fred stepped forward, his presence commanding. "Where is Nadia?" he asked. Jennifer's face darkened. Nadia's husband, the man she stole from Victoria, had been arrested for fraud and ritual killings. The lavish life she boasted about had collapsed. She had been disgraced publicly and fled the city in shame. Victoria closed her eyes briefly. So, the proud Nadia had fallen too. She should have felt satisfaction. But all she felt was pity. Victoria's uncle fell to his knees. "Victoria, forgive us," he wept. "I was blinded by greed. I should have treated you like my own child." Jennifer, too, fell beside him. "We lost everything," she sobbed. "Your inheritance is gone. The business failed. We are suffering, Victoria." Please, help us. The same people who had denied her food. The same people who had thrown her out into the streets. Now begged for her mercy. Victoria's heart ached. She turned to Fred. His face was unreadable, but he gave a small nod. Victoria, this is your decision. Victoria took a deep breath. She had two choices. To turn her back on them, just as they had done to her. Or to show them the mercy they never gave her. She looked at the broken man before her. Her uncle, the man who had betrayed her parents' trust. Then at Jennifer, the woman who had treated her worse than a slave. Finally, she made her decision. Uncle. Aunt Jennifer. Victoria began. They held their breath. I forgive you. Jennifer burst into tears. Her uncle clutched her hands. Thank you, my daughter, he sobbed. Thank you. Victoria gently pulled away. But I will never forget. Their faces fell. I cannot erase what you did to me. I will not allow you to hurt me again. But I will help you, for the sake of my parents' memory. She signaled to her drivers. They carried bags of food and money into the house. Jennifer fell to the ground, wailing in gratitude. Victoria looked at the home she once suffered in. Then she turned to Fred. We're done here. And without another word, they left. This story teaches us that kindness and patience always win in the end. Those who betray and mistreat others will eventually face the consequences of their actions. Never give up on yourself. Even when others do. Your success will speak for you. What do you think about this story? Share your thoughts in the comments section. I would love to read from you. I have another exciting story coming in a few days. Subscribe to my channel and turn on the notification bell so you'll be notified as soon as I upload it. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the like button and share it with your friends. Thank you for watching.